Hey, how's it going? How you doing? Are you alone right now? That's a creepy thing to ask somebody. I just mean like, hey, are you quarantined? You know, maybe kind of bored, need some escapism? I'm here to provide that. I'm here to bring you some books that I'm recommending as the best quarantine reads. The things you should pick up and enjoy because, hey, I think we all need a little bit of escape right now. Like, I'm in this, oh, look how whimsical it is. This is awesome. Nope, that's worse. Reality sucks. I don't want that at all. This, oh, look at this, it's so cool, this is amazing, boring, lame. I remember sad things. I don't want the sad things. I don't know what I put here in editing, but like, we'd all rather be here. And I know not everyone's the same. I can't recommend just like 5 happy-go-lucky books and satisfy everybody. Some of you are weird, sick freaks like myself, and maybe you don't want to escape to a happy place. You'd rather escape to a sad, darker place, so when you jump back to reality here, you're like, I guess things aren't that bad. I wasn't mauled by a vampire bear. That's a thing. And yeah, so the world doesn't seem horrible. And I have those recommendations for you too. I've split this into 2 categories. We got column A, numero uno, and that's gonna be our 5 happy-go-lucky picks. These are gonna be the good times, happy vibes. And then over here, we have column B, numero dos, with 5, the world's pretty dark and crappy, but these places are much worse. So I'm gonna enjoy where we are existing now. I get you people, I get it, and I'm kind of one of you. I'm a little bit of both you all. Heck, I don't know what I've put here in editing to make this hand gesture make sense, but I don't know, I'll make it make sense. Well, let's go ahead and start off with those happy-go-lucky picks, shall we? And kicking it off, I have one that's a sci-fi pick. I know a lot of you aren't necessarily sci-fi fans. A lot of my audience are fantasy nerds, but this is a series I think will be pretty much universally loved and enjoyed. I can't imagine the kind of person who would hate this story, and that is Bobverse. If you like the idea of having your brain put into a supercomputer that's gonna make you smarter, and then shotgunned into space, and then you have to like survive and adapt as you're in this super technologically advanced spaceship. Oh, also when humanity kind of gets boom-bloomed, you know, that's a fun setting. But it gets really happy because the person who's telling the story is honestly kind of like Harry Dresden, constantly full of references and good times. So basically, yeah, make Harry Dresden not a wizard, just a super nerd, put his brain in a computer and shoot him into space to survive, and let him copy himself a whole bunch. And you have Bobverse. It's really actually like a kind of hard sci-fi in its premise. Like, what if you were just made into a supercomputer that could duplicate yourself a whole bunch and make a lot of spaceships and explore the universe? That's really dope. But its execution is more of like the pop culture reference, humorous variety, and it just really works. Like, it's such a strange formula, but the execution was so solid that I think it just knocks it out of the park. And I think Bobverse is an absolutely outstanding happy-go-lucky read for you to jump on into to maybe ignore the headlines about, like, you know, bad stuff. I forget the author's name, I think it's Dennis Taylor. I'll put a correction up if I'm wrong. If I just got that right, good job me, I'm impressed I got that. But I'll go ahead and move out of here because I know a lot of you may not be necessarily sci-fi fans and you're already thinking, Daniel, you better give me fantasy right now and make it specifically tailored to me. And you happen to be a parent who wants to share a really good story with a kid. Or someone who's just willing to go back and have a nostalgia reread. And that's who I'm targeting next. I know it's a very specific subset, but I want to include you all, people who are interested in nostalgia and maybe someone who wants to share a good story with a kid. And for that recommendation, I'm gonna go with Redwall. Now, to have a compelling, I can forget about reality read, I can't just recommend stuff that's nothing but farts and giggles and happiness because that's not going to envelop you as a reader. It's just not. And I think Redwall's a nice balance in between. One, you have your little furry friends, we're following little rodents and stuff going through their adventures. There's enough to capture a lot of people's minds, imaginations, and make you forget. But on top of that, it's got some lofty themes, man. This is a book that's gonna make you think, not only when you're reading it, but after you're done. That's awesome. After you put down the book, you're not just thrown back into reality to be sad. No, you can still be here thinking about it because it tackles the themes and ideas of maybe you can forgive certain things to fight a bigger, badder evil. There's going to be loss, there's going to be hardships, but at the end of the day, you're following tiny rodents and it's adorable and it's still overall pretty happy. I might be kind of weird me include this one, but I recently reread a little bit of Redwall and it just brought back a flood of nostalgia emotions and happiness because I could tell I wasn't just enjoying it because of nostalgia. It's still legitimately good. Like, Redwall holds up, and that always just makes me so happy. And if you have a little one who maybe you want to get into fantasy and you don't want to throw the typical Harry Potter at them, or more likely they've already read it, Redwall is another story you could hand them and have them just enjoy it through and through. Because I can tell you, as an adult man who's pretty damn cynical, it holds up for me. Okay, I hear you. I hear you. Daniel, give me some hardcore adult fantasy that I can escape to. I'm not interested in sci-fi. I don't want nostalgia or have kids. Give me hardcore fantasy, damn it, for adults. And I got you too, man. Don't worry about it. I used to talk about this series all the time, but I haven't for a while, to the point where I'm even getting comments every now and then that are like, have you read blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, yes, I have. Before commenting that, how about you take the 3 seconds to search on my channel, does Daniel have reviews of these? Oh, he does. In fact, he has several videos on them, including a why you should read. And if I've done my job in editing, you already know what I'm gonna talk about, and it's Gentlemen Bastards. It's so good. Oh, if you have not read it, get into it. It's in my top 10 fantasy reads of all time, and it's one that I think holds up to rereads incessantly because they are just exquisite. Gold star, medal awarded, amazing. And a few of the reasons I think they're especially good for right now is there's friendship at the core of the story between 2 criminals, but it's a nice wholesome friendship. And their world is skeevy and dark, but there's so much heart in the story being told that it just doesn't really matter that there's these darker elements, because you know these 2 friends have each other's back no matter what. I think a little bit of dark added into a story can help you just be enveloped by the positive aspects to it all the better, and Gentlemen Bastards is just a primo example of that. So if it appeals to you, the idea of maybe following a couple of criminals, but they're good dudes, living in a world full of scum, but they're coming out on top, they're having a good time. It's Ocean's 11 meets, I don't know, First Law? Is that an apt comparison? I don't know, but I said it and I'm gonna stick with it. No retakes here. Obviously, friendship kind of has a special appeal on top, little icing layer currently, because a lot of us are super isolated, so reading a story with a couple of friends going at it could maybe give us a little bit of catharsis, but maybe not enough. Maybe you need a book that has like a full party companion group of friends who are just hanging out and it feels super genuine because there's so much personality and chemistry going on. Well, that's going to be a fantastic transition into our next recommendation here, and that recommendation is going to be Kings of the Wild. That was a short drum roll because I wanted to get right to it. In terms of just happy-go-lucky vibes, if you want something that's just going to be so much fun to jump into, and you can escape into a D&D based, super well realized world, I don't know of a lot better than the Banned series starting with Kings of the Wild right now. And its follow-up, Bloody Rose, is actually a wonderful follow-up as well. I think it's just a 1-2 punch of quality. There is, of course, real emotional moments here. One of the things I've praised Nicholas Ames for repeatedly as an author is not only maintaining fantastic humor, but then also not really letting up with some real quality emotional just whams. So you will maybe have some tears, maybe be a little boo-hooing, you know, but you're gonna love what's going on and you're going to care deeply about the story being told. But you'll laugh along the way. Moog will be one of your new favorite fantasy comedic characters of all time. I freaking promise you. I'll give you 20 billion trillion bubble money coins if he isn't. He's going to be. Moog's incredible. This is definitely from the new generation of fantasy authors. Of course, it only came out recently and it's definitely on that forefront. A lot of people talking about it, popularity through the roof vibes. But I think it's one of the best isolation reads you could get into because of the fact that there's so much time, energy, and effort put into just building this group dynamic that'll make you feel like you're hanging out on a game night with a bunch of your friends that you've known for so long. Like, that's just the vibe that comes through, and I think is really important for a lot of people. I understand if you're like, Daniel, I live with my girlfriend, I'm not actually obeying the quarantine because I'm kind of a person, and I just want something to read to get away from all these headlines. And that's okay too, except you should obey the quarantine and don't go out right now. But if you just want probably like the best escapist fantasy book, well, I've talked about this series a lot recently. I just interviewed the author, and I'm gonna keep touting this series horn because I think it's so worth the time and effort from you. It's just, oh my God, so much better than I ever thought it would be, and that is the Dresden Files. Pick up Stormfront, and I promise you, you'll go, wow, that was a lot of fun, cool. And if you keep going, by the time you get to book 8, 9, 10, and I think you could probably do a book every 2 days because these are fast reads, then you're going to realize, holy crap, this slowly just evolved into one of the deepest, most epic urban fantasy stories I have ever read. Featuring, starring, center spotlight, one of the best fleshed out characters of modern fantasy. If you get to book 8, 9, 10 and Harry Dresden doesn't feel like a real guy you've known for a long time, I don't know what's wrong with you, because the character work on display here, holy smokes. Like even when the curtain comes down and I'm like snap back to reality, oh, there goes gravity, I still feel like I know Dresden and I can think about the funny escapades and adventures our boy goes on. Dresden Files, within the last few months, has snuck its way up from a good fantasy series I enjoy to one of my favorite fantasy series of all time, probably higher than not in my top 10 fantasy series rankings. And that is because it's just, oh, it starts good, oh, this is getting better. By the time you get to changes, Dresden Files has changed your life. Like, let's just be honest, it's done that. It's completely changed how I view urban fantasy, the concept of a wizard character. Jim Butcher totally achieved his goal of going, I'm tired of seeing wizards not blow things up. Let's have a wizard that'll blow things up, because that just makes sense. So cool. I've recommended 5 happy-go-lucky, you're gonna enjoy these and have a good time fantasy books. Dresden has some dark moments, all of them have some darker moments, but none of them are like, oh, I'm depressed because I read that. Well, now we need to go to the other side. We need to see the dark side of my audience and satiate these animals, throw some chum into the water, get them all stirred up, and satisfy their dark, twisted desires. And before them, I've picked 5 books that are probably a terrible idea for you to read right now, but hey, let's just recommend them, and some people are gonna love this. They're gonna just eat it on up, slurp down that chum, and go on through these books, and then feel better about our own world as a result. I'm gonna start light for these, okay? I'm actually just gonna recommend a book that has a really dark view on the world, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's like a grim, dark experience in any way. It's just, you know, maybe realistic in some aspects of how it views humanity with a nice occult overlay. And for that, I'm gonna go ahead and throw Ninth House into the mix. Part of the reason I'm choosing this is Ninth House really is exquisite. This is an extraordinary book. There's a reason it has such positive reviews, even from the likes of Stephen King. I know I mention that every time I bring up Ninth House, but it's just impressive to see this positive review from Stephen King about this book. But if you are looking for a darker tale to pull you away from reality and make you feel not so awful about the real world, this might be the way for you to go. Despite the fact that it takes place in the real world, yeah, IKEA is going to be mentioned, but it's just so well done. It's so, everything about this story works. Leigh Bardugo is a master of her craft, and I enjoy what she accomplished with Ninth House so much. It's another kind of wizardish detective tale, I guess you could describe it as. Yeah? So if you like that kind of Dresden vibe and you've already finished the Dresden Files and want to go a bit darker, Ninth House, I think you'll enjoy. I think it's something that the wider fantasy community needs to embrace, because alternative fantasy is real fantasy and should be in the discussion. Next up, we're gonna go full on to fantastical horror vibes. Not going into the deepest, darkest, most disturbing stories yet, but one that I think is certainly gonna give people some shivers, give you a little bit of them creeps, and that will be Something Wicked This Way Comes. This is one my dad recommended quite a while ago, and after I've read it, yeah, it's good. It's not horrifying. You're not gonna be staying up in the middle of the night, staring out of your window like Jack Torrance, foreshadowing, slowly going insane because this book got so deep in your head. But it's quality creep material. It's a few steps up from those Goosebump vibes, but you're gonna take some step downs from like the full on like, oh, this book might break my brain. But why I think it's a really good read right now is it's got some wholesome messaging to it, while also undoubtedly, unequivocally being a bit of a horror story. You're following 2 young men, 2 boys, and a creepy carnival comes into town, and they start having experiences with this creepy carnival. You have your Mr. Dark, the over-the-top, zealous madman at the center of this carnival who has targeted our young protagonist. I also really want to recommend this one because it's coming from the man, the myth, the legend, Ray Bradbury, who is just poetic with his material, and that holds up as true as ever with Something Wicked This Way Comes. If you haven't even read a Bradbury before, this is a good entry point. I know he has other more iconic tales, but Something Wicked This Way Comes is an absolutely phenomenal demonstration of how he can kind of wrap you up in his poetic writing, get you lost to the point where you aren't even noticing depressing. That you've totally left this world and you've forgotten the headlines you read all morning that made you a sad panda, and instead you're just sitting alongside these two young men as they desperately try and convince the adults of their world that there's psychotic murderers after them that maybe have some supernatural powers. I guess the people I'm recommending this one the strongest to are those who have an inkling towards the more classic minimal fantasy that was really popular for a while, because if you are really well read, you've probably already checked this one out. Definitely holds up to a reread, I would assume, especially with how beautiful the writing is. But for a lot of people in my audience who have continually expressed they want to get into more of the classics, more of the fantasy that's not traditional, this is absolutely a great starting point. It's minimal fantasy. The magic's of course not going to be on like a Westeros vibe. That's not what we're going for. It's definitely got that more creepy, surreal type use of magical elements, but it works. And I think it's an exquisite example of how stories like this from the classic era can hold up to the test of time phenomenally well, especially when the authors were so dedicated to their prose like Bradbury was. Okay, Daniel, you've held back. You've given me one that's not even that scary, and you gave me another one that's maybe a bit creepy. I want a horror book, damn it. Give me something that's gonna scare me, make me feel all alone and isolated, and get those shivers really going. I don't know why I keep doing that. That's more disturbing than anything else I'm gonna bring up in this video. Well, if you want the isolation experience through the horror genre, there's no better recommendation I have up my sleeve for isolation type horror than I Am Legend. Yeah, you can be isolated as a group with like 40 Days of Night. That's a good one. Graphic novel that's worth your time. But I Am Legend to me is the de facto king ruler of not only vampire horror outside of Dracula, because, you know, gotta give respects, hats off to Dracula, definitely also worth a read if you haven't given it a go. But few books have ever really made me feel as alone as I Am Legend did. We have the complete package of just this man surviving in a world filled with monsters, a wonderful reveal at the end that if it hasn't been spoiled for you, I'm not going to, and again, very nice prose with just borderline unrivaled atmospheric work from the author here. I Am Legend is an absolute staple of classic horror. Unfortunately, it's never been adapted very well. The Will Smith movie is a fine horror movie. That is not I Am Legend. And this again falls in the category of like, if I was gonna set up like a course load of these are must-read fantasy books that people might not think about or consider, I Am Legend is right there, damn it. Even if you've had that twist ending spoiled for you, definitely check it out still. It's an impressive example I think a lot of people can learn from of just how to, in isolation, without interacting with other people, still flesh out and establish a character. It's a difficult thing to do, but it is done exceptionally well here. You have a man full of insecurities and fear who's venturing out into a world that wants to kill him. It's gonna make you tear up, it's gonna make you feel all kinds of feels, and most importantly of all, it'll probably creep you out quite a bit. Why am I making this a horror thing? This is supposed to be an isolation thing. Okay, we'll back away from horror, we'll get more to just depressing. How about that? Let's just go full on depressing for this next entry here. The Road. This is the most depressing book I have ever read. McCarthy here crafted a story that will just utterly emotionally drain you. It is unrelenting in its utterly bleak world with characters who have little flickers of hope at best. It's a father and son venturing towards a maybe point of salvation in a post-apocalyptic landscape. Yes, this isn't exactly fantasy. Again, I'm venturing outside. I know some of y'all get angry when I do that, but guess what? I'm a well-read salamander and I'm gonna bring in outside picks because I think it's important for you all to not just read fantasy all the time. It's the best genre, don't get me wrong, it is. But that doesn't mean there isn't other things you need to read as well. And Cormac McCarthy's The Road, I read this in high school, first time through, and there was a PE class. I can't forget why, but I wasn't able to participate in. And so I was sitting on the sidelines just reading The Road. And when PE was over and everyone kind of was just going back into the locker rooms, I remember just being so like empty feeling inside. That like my friends were being like, hey man, you wanna go do, and I was just like, yeah, no, I wanna go home and just stare at a bowl of porridge for a while. The Road's gonna make you feel that way. What this book manages to do is explore the darkest avenues of what humanity can do to each other in like a way of such realistic evil that I think that's what really is so bothersome about it. It's not the over-the-top evil you see from so many iconic villains. It's just real life, grotesque achievements of humanity that feel like, yeah, if this was going on, that would probably happen. I get depressed just talking about The Road because it's so absolutely extraordinary at accomplishing exactly what it wants to. And what it wants to accomplish is making you, the reader, just numb. Just depressed, numb, drained from going through this exercise in what is the just worst case scenario for humanity's future. Good job, Cormac McCarthy. I really napped a lot after reading your book. It's one of the books that had one of the strongest emotional impacts on me, because it was just like, hey, we're all terrible, and if the apocalypse actually happens, you should probably just opt out. But Daniel, I don't want to be depressed. I don't want to be scared. I want to read the book that's going to psychologically mess with me the most, with the very specific situation we are all currently in. There's an outbreak, there's a pandemic. I want something that plays on that. Give me that. I'm a total masochist and want to make myself more afraid of the real life headlines that are going on. There's a very obvious answer to what I just put forth. Do you know what it is? Because you really should. Clearly, that is going to be The Stand by Stephen King. The lack of Stephen King up to this point in this list should have been a damn good hint of where this was all going. The #1 pinnacle pick, the prodigy child of this specific scenario in the real world, freaking everybody out, is going to be The Stand. We have a super flu, a little bit different. We don't have a flu going on. Well, I mean, some of you probably have the flu. I had a head cold, so I know you could definitely have other illnesses right now. But yes, a little bit of a super flu. Make that just a little bit of change, boom, you got our current situation. Spreading, wiping out humanity. You then add Stephen King's twisted mind coming in to just go all kinds of other stuff, and then the degradation of humanity and the human mind that Stephen King likes to progress through his stories, and you have one of his greatest crafted materials to date. The Stand is largely considered his best by many die-hard fans, so if you haven't even read Stephen King, this isn't a bad place to start. It's a commitment, but let's be honest, a lot of you have a lot of time in your hands right now. The Stand is gonna be like, oh wow, this is pretty freaky, it's getting to me, makes me wanna wash my hands more, need to go back to the real world. This is not better, because there's still a lot of reasons to wash your hands. By the way, wash your hands. The Stand, it's just so vivid. There's so many dark, twisted moments that just make you feel so involved in the story because you are attached to these characters. As I recently talked about in my Why You Should Read Stephen King video, Stephen King takes great effort to make you feel just mentally close to not only his protagonists, but his antagonists as well. You understand their falling apart. You relate to the trials and troubles, regardless of who the character is, that results in them becoming who they are in the story. You have love, you have hate, you have depression, you have an attempt to rebuild, and dire hope. The themes as well could carry over to the real world right now in terms of humanity getting along, trusting each other, and trying to do your best to maintain some semblance of normalcy while a whole lot of hits the fan. And hey, if you read this now, you'll probably be done in time to enjoy the Stand adaptation that is coming down the road by director Josh Boone. I'm looking forward to that quite a bit. But in terms of, hey, you're a sick, dark, twisted puppy, there are few stories I could even imagine coming close to being as mentally torturous to read right now than The Stand. I mean, even my mom in that Why You Should Read the Stephen King video I just did said, hey, if you want to read something really messed up right now, go with The Stand. I don't know what that says about my mom, but hey, I love you, Mom. But of course, this leaves us to the part of the video where I ask you, the audience, you sick, twisted puppies, or you happy-go-lucky people looking for some happy times, what books do you recommend during this, you know, quarantine teeny phase that we're in as humanity? I've been binging the Dresden Files and absolutely loving it. I also recently read Something Wicked This Way Comes for the first time, and it was exquisite. Let me know in those comments right down there what you're reading, what you want to read, or let me know which of all the books I just talked about, happy or sad, were most appealing to you. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. And of course, have a good one, y'all. Peace. And of course, I'd like to record a special shout out to my latest high tier Patreons, Jevin Lechinger, hope I said that close to correct, and Kenny. Thank you guys so much for your support. Much appreciated.